Do I have any doubt that Meghan Markle was a call girl? Of course not. I don't have any doubts whatsoever. I believe that she's being protected not because of who she is, but because of the connections of the people that put her there.
Some believed her silence was out of loyalty to the crown. Others argued she simply didn't want to insert herself into the chaos. But that theory doesn't match Meghan's history. She never held back when addressing racial bias within the monarchy. She never stayed silent when exposing the mistreatment she faced behind palace walls. She never hesitated to confront the UK press and its hostility toward her. SOY when the biggest royal scandal hit its breaking point, louder, uglier, more explosive than anything before. Did Meghan suddenly remove herself from the narrative entirely? Why did the woman who once challenged the monarchy head-on choose silence at the very moment the world expected her voice the most? The truth isn't straightforward, and it definitely wasn't accidental.
Meghan Markle being part of this whole ordeal, I believe she's a nobody, but she's a nobody who knows who put her there. And this is why things are tricky right now for everybody. And this is why those documents were redacted.
Meghan's silence wasn't surrender, it was calculated. And the closer you look, the clearer it becomes that her quiet protected far more than her public reputation. Because Meghan's words carry weight, and weight, when dropped at the wrong moment, can destroy entire worlds in seconds. But the real question is this: what happens when silence itself becomes the spark that's more volatile than truth? Stay with me, because what comes next shifts the entire narrative.
People like Meghan Markle or Jeffrey Epstein don't just suddenly pop out of nowhere. And if they do, it's because they're planted there. We know that Meghan Markle, sure, she went after Harry, but she had help getting there.
From the start of her public career, Meghan shaped herself as someone who never turns away from uncomfortable realities. Even years before Prince Harry entered her life, she was outspoken about gender inequality, abuse of power, and the cultural expectation that women must remain silent to protect the influential. Her public image was built on defying silence. So when the Prince Andrew, Jeffrey Epstein scandal exploded across international headlines, many assumed Meghan would be the first royal to address it. She had the influence, the platform, and the history of calling out injustice. Supporters, critics, and media outlets all waited, expecting a statement, an interview, a single acknowledgement. But instead of responding, she vanished from the conversation completely. No comment in interviews, no subtle reference in podcasts, not even a hint in public speeches. It wasn't just quiet, it felt intentional, like a strategic withdrawal. What made it even more jarring was that Meghan continued to speak boldly on other explosive issues during the same period. She openly condemned racism within the monarchy, detailed the emotional toll she suffered inside palace walls, and accused the British press of orchestrating a campaign to destroy her character. She pushed back against the institution and the media without hesitation, yet she left the most volatile royal scandal untouched.
Ghislaine Maxwell, according to the article, says that she did know Meghan Markle. Let's not forget that Virginia Roberts called her as a witness because she had information about
her. Supporters searched for explanations, but none of them landed. This wasn't fear, distraction, or a missed moment. It was deliberate silence, a total refusal to engage. The public started to question why her voice vanished only on that single topic. Was there pressure behind the scenes? A risk? A consequence waiting if she spoke? Once that question was raised, it didn't go away. But the real story shifts when we stop asking why she was quiet and start asking who needed her to be. Because the next part is far more unsettling. Inside the monarchy, silence isn't just encouraged, it's enforced. Every royal operates under a rigid communications playbook where every sentence is approved, every interview is filtered, and timing is carefully engineered. When the Epstein scandal erupted, the palace's crisis machinery snapped into defensive mode. Their priority wasn't clarity or accountability, it was control. Advisors built a strategy around one rule: no royal would speak publicly, directly or indirectly, about Epstein. The order applied to all of them, including Harry and Meghan, even though they had no personal connection to the situation. The palace didn't want one more voice fueling the fire, especially hers. Meghan's transparency, her influence over global media, and her history of calling out powerful institutions made her the biggest threat to a narrative they were trying to suffocate. Her silence wasn't absence, it was containment.
But going back to Meghan Markle, apparently she went by the name Flower. That was her character name because for some reason, she wants to portray herself as this demure person. This woman who has, I want to put it kindly and nicely, has been around the block so many times, there's already like a trail.
Behind palace doors, the instructions were unmistakable. Avoid all mention of the subject, refuse questions, cut off interviewers who pressed. And never acknowledge the scandal, not in interviews, not in speeches, not even in passing. Meghan wasn't asked to silence herself. She was ordered to disappear from that entire conversation. Whether she supported the decision or despised it didn't matter. As long as she was an active royal, the choice wasn't hers. Her silence didn't come from fear or uncertainty, it was mandated by the institution she had married into. But here's where everything shifts. When Meghan and Harry stepped away from royal duties, that obligation should have ended, yet the silence remained. Which leads to only one unsettling question. If the monarchy no longer controlled her voice, what kept her quiet? That answer takes us straight to Hollywood and the strategic calculation that changed everything. When they left the palace and stepped into the world of media power, most assumed this was the moment Meghan would finally speak freely. They built a foundation, signed massive streaming contracts, and sat through interviews crafted to reclaim their story. Meghan now had full autonomy, no palace, no protocol, no gag order. And still, she never addressed Epstein. This wasn't royal censorship anymore. It was branding. Her team understood something vital. Any public comment, even a single sentence, would permanently tie her name to one of the darkest scandals of the modern era. Her public evolution depended on her identity as activist, innovator, global figure, not as the face of a story rooted in corruption she didn't create.
Press is trying to pave the way back for Meghan Markle, almost like Fergie, to come back. But Ghislaine revelations put Meghan in a very, very bad light. Because if it is all true, Meghan Markle is way worse than we thought.
Some believed she remained silent out of loyalty to the crown. Others suggested she stayed out of the way to avoid adding fuel to an already burning fire. But that theory doesn't match who Meghan has proven to be. She never held back when addressing claims of royal racism. She never hesitated when revealing how the institution treated her. She never backed down from calling out the British press. So why, when the most explosive scandal linked to the monarchy erupted, did she suddenly vanish from the conversation entirely? The truth is layered, intentional, and far more calculated than anyone realized. Meghan's silence wasn't surrender, it was a tactic. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes that her silence wasn't self-protection alone, it was shielding something much bigger. Because Meghan's voice carries weight, and a voice that powerful, released at the wrong moment, could set fire to everything around it. But silence, if held too long, grows sharp enough to cut through even the strongest institutions. So what happens when staying quiet becomes more dangerous than speaking aloud? Stay with me. What comes next changes the entire picture. Behind curtains, the directive was firm. Avoid the subject, refuse questions, shut down anyone who tried to raise it, and never address it publicly, not on camera, not in interviews, not even on social media. Meghan wasn't just discouraged from talking. She was instructed to disappear from the subject entirely. Whether she supported the decision or despised it didn't matter. As long as she wore the royal title, the choice wasn't hers. Her silence wasn't uncertainty. It was compliance enforced by the institution she'd stepped into. But here's where the story bends. When Meghan and Harry stepped away, that rulebook should have dissolved. Yet, even with her freedom restored, the quiet remained. Which leaves one question hanging. If no one could silence her anymore, why didn't she speak? The trail leads straight into Hollywood, and the brand overhaul that redefined everything. Once outside the palace and inside the heart of global entertainment, people assumed the couple would finally speak without restriction. They launched a charity, signed massive streaming contracts, and sat down for interviews designed to reclaim their narrative. For the first time, Meghan held complete control over her own voice. No palace, no protocols, no handlers. Yet even then, the Epstein subject remained untouched. This was no longer royal censorship, this was calculated branding. Her team recognized a critical truth. Even acknowledging the scandal would permanently attach her name to one of the darkest criminal networks of the century. Her new identity relied on empowerment, entrepreneurship, influence. Not commentary tied to a scandal orbiting the institution she escaped. Every public appearance was crafted with precision. The monarchy had survived affairs, divorces, scandals, but this one could fracture it beyond repair. One comment from someone connected to the family, especially someone global, outspoken, unfiltered, could reignite the storm. And no one posed more risk than Meghan Markle. She did not need evidence or accusations. Her opinion alone could trigger a media explosion. Silence was not shielding Andrew, it was shielding the monarchy itself. And even after leaving, Meghan was still tethered to the crown she walked away from. The real turning point came when a major US network pitched a primetime documentary about the modern royal system. It wasn't advertised as Epstein-focused. It was framed around the pressure of palace life, the politics, the toll of being a woman under constant surveillance. It sounded safe, controllable, even beneficial. Notes were drafted, talking points circulated. Meghan could speak powerfully without repeating Oprah. Then one producer dropped a single question that detonated everything. If the documentary covers major royal scandals, would Meghan Meghan addressed the Andrews situation, no one was prepared. If she refused, she'd look like she was hiding something. If she spoke, she attached herself to a scandal forever. There was no safe door. The documentary wasn't an opportunity, it was a trap. Negotiations ended instantly. The project died before contracts inked. Behind the scenes, word reached the palace and panic spread. Not because she accepted the interview, but because she considered it. The possibility alone was enough to rattle the monarchy. William, especially, felt the tension like a blade. He'd carried the shadow of Andrew's scandal for years, not from loyalty, but because he knew how deeply it threatened the throne he would one day inherit. Meghan, to him, was unpredictable, a media weapon capable of shattering generations of royal narrative with a single sentence. She didn't even need to name Andrew. Just suggesting silence was wrong could collapse the family's defense overnight. Harry, trapped between duty and loyalty, felt both worlds tightening. William protected the institution. Harry protected Meghan. Their divide wasn't personal, it was ideological, and Meghan stood in the center, one voice with the power to crumble a monarchy or reshape her global brand forever. So after all the pressure, branding strategies, international tension, and the silent war between legacy and identity, her silence suddenly makes sense. She isn't quiet because she's scared. She isn't silent because she's detached. She is silent because one sentence could ignite a global firestorm no one could contain, and sometimes silence isn't protection, it's destruction waiting to be unleashed. Whether she ever speaks is a question only time can answer, but if she does, the world won't just hear it, it will stop. If you've made it to the end, you're not just watching royal headlines, you're tracking power, silence, and invisible strategy. If you want to go deeper into Meghan's rise and the circles that positioned her, watch our previous breakdown on her Soho House years. When you do, everything you read here will start connecting. Click, watch, subscribe, because truth buried is truth waiting to surface.
Die Medien versuchen, den Weg für die Rückkehr von Meghan Markle zu ebnen, genau wie Ferguson. Aber Ghislaines Enthüllungen haben Meghan in eine sehr, sehr schlechte Situation gebracht. Denn wenn das alles wahr ist, Meghan Markle ist viel schlimmer, als wir denken.